Hi everyone, we are live. So Vivek, you are done with your 500 miles.
I'm at mile 509 actually, and I thought that would be all I have to go, but I still have to go all the way to San Diego. So I've got another, was it 125 miles?
125 in 7 days.
That's right, that's the plan.
So we're here for our first town hall after you finish your run, after your 500-mile run, and we've got a queue of questions of people who've already sent them in. So let's just go ahead and get started. So from Kevin in LA, what was the most difficult part of the run, and what made you feel stronger?
So really, of course, it's a long distance, but especially when I was out there pacing those 20 or 25 mile days in the Central Valley, and it turned quickly from pouring rain at the very beginning of the run to long days of heat, I wondered, as people told me, this is a crazy idea. Am I actually going to make it over the mountains and all the way through LA? And especially when I was crossing over the Tehachapi Mountains and the San Francisco Canyon into LA County, I lost my cell phone reception. I wondered, am I really going to be able to push through? But what really kept me going, even on those days, and these roads aren't necessarily made for running, as we know. So there were stretches where I didn't see a lot of people out there, but I always saw someone, and whether it was someone at a convenience store, someplace I stopped for lunch, or someone who just wandered out of their house to ask me what's going on, where are you headed, and how can I help. It really restored so much of the faith that I had in people, and it was one of the reasons I wanted to do this type of campaign. So those conversations made the difference for me. It was why I did this run, and it made it all worth it.
And so for a lot of the new viewers, if you're just tuning in, Vivek just finished running 500 miles from Sacramento all the way down to LA. And trust me, it was every inch, every mile, because there were stretches of the road where we said, Vivek, no, there's literally no road here. You can't run. And Vivek was like, no, I have to cover every inch.
There was definitely some walking in there.
There was some walking, especially after he hurt himself on the second day.
That's
but,
right.
You're here, you're in one piece. I hope you're taking this time to rest up for your next 125 miles all the way down to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Absolutely. So resting up, but of course still keeping in shape. Many miles to go.
Yeah, don't go too relaxed and just eat all the ice cream you can get. So the next question from Bill. Do you support the idea of a public bank for California?
I do, and so this is something where you really want to make sure you get the details right, but the concept is something that's really important. For states have billions of dollars. We're in an economy where we need more investment in public resources, everything from infrastructure to education to making sure that we drive out the payday loan industry that hurts too many people, especially low-income people in California and across the country. And the public bank concept can do a lot to alleviate this. We have these billions of dollars in deposits. Why don't we put those to work for people in California? Now, of course, whenever you have politicians getting their hands on billions of dollars in public dollars, you always want to make sure that you put some rules in there, you put some guardrails in there to make sure that that money is actually being used to help the public.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I'm running my campaign without any corporate or political action committee money or any other special interest money, because we have so much to do to rebuild trust in government. But at the same time, I really do think that done right, this is an idea whose time has come. We've seen it work in North Dakota. The new governor of New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, has put out very interesting and important proposals on this, and it could do so many things. I think we should refinance student loans when students are paying these sky-high interest rates. A public bank can help facilitate that. Here in California with Proposition 64, we have cannabis that, because of federal law, and we see what Attorney General Jeff Sessions is doing at the federal level, don't have access to public banking services. A public bank in California can help with that. And when it comes to our infrastructure needs, which are billions and billions of dollars that are right now not funded, public bank can help with that. And finally, when it comes to everyday consumers and citizens in California who don't have access to public banking services, a public bank can help with that as well. So it's on my agenda. I'm very interested in it, and it's something that I do want to explore if I'm elected as the state treasurer.
Next question is from Christian. What are your thoughts on current international trade agreements, and do you believe they've been effective in implementing a universal playing field for the international market?
So that's a really good question, because right now there's a lot of discussion on trade in Washington, D.C., and California has, just with China alone, hundreds of billions of dollars in global trade every year. And if Donald Trump gets his way with some of these sanctions and sparks a trade war, those are jobs and business revenue, and that'll affect people in California and not in a positive way. So we do have to remember that international trade helps businesses and helps consumers in California. The key, as the questioner said, is whether that playing field is actually level. And I think that a lot of people who before simply said international trade is good, let's pursue it to the hilt, have come to realize in recent years that unless you actually take care to make sure that those rules are truly level, then a lot of people will lose their jobs and the payoff won't really show up. It may show up on balance sheets of corporations, but it won't show up in the individual lives of everyday people in California and across the country. And it's especially the case when those people who do the most well in our society are also the ones who are donating to candidates in our political system.
Right.
With so many things, comes back to campaign finance reform as well. So for me, international trade is important. It's important that we forge both political and economic links with other cities, states, and countries all around the world. We've done that on business, we've done it in democracy building, we've done it most importantly on climate change, as Governor Brown has done. But it is really important that those rules work for everybody in California and in America, and not just those at the top.
Right. And for newcomers as well, Vivek is not taking any corporate, PAC, or special interest money. So to that point on campaign finance reform, I know that you're doing this because it's so important for people to be able to see someone be able to run successfully, and then maybe that'll change the landscape of how campaign finance is run, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I often think about this old Mark Twain quotation where he says, the weather, everybody talks about it, but no one actually does anything about it. And, it's hard to do something about the weather.
Especially when the system, not the weather, but especially with campaign finance, it's just the way it is. It's hard to push change.
Exactly, but it has never been so important. And I'll tell you, we were talking about the run that we were all engaged in. I guess I was doing the running, but you and Hung Man, our campaign manager, came along.
We were not doing the running.
Every inch for the ride. But the one thing that really got people nodding and talking was, this system is a system where I don't have a voice.
Right.
And that's where I feel like so much of that anger gets channeled, because they say a pox on all their houses. Who's looking out for me, and whom can I trust? And so I want to be the type of candidate where no one person, except maybe my mom or dad, is going to agree with me on every single issue. But they will know, even if I disagree, that person is trying to do the right thing. He has the experience, he has the credentials, but more than anything, he's powered by the people he meets and the stories that he listens to. So that's the campaign I'm hoping to run. We'll see how it goes in a couple weeks.
Got it.
Yes.
All right. Next question is from Nick, who says, okay, I don't know money stuff, so Treasurer 101 question here.
Yeah.
How do bond ratings work? And what influence does the treasurer himself or herself have over this?
Yes. So bond rating basically reflects the credit worthiness of the person issuing a bond. So to truly go bond 101, a bond is when you issue a note and you borrow money with a promise to pay that back in fixed installments over time. And so your credit rating determines how likely it is, on the basis of the bond market, that you will actually be able to pay that, how good of a credit risk you are, and you'll be able to pay that money back. And that matters, because the more likely it is that you'll be able to pay that money back, the less someone will charge you in order to borrow money. And given that we have outstanding bonds, in about $70 billion total, even a couple basis points comes to tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and eventually even billions of dollars. So it's really important because, number one, it saves money, and that's direct money that the taxpayers of California can invest in other worthy projects, everything from education to healthcare, if we're not paying so much on bond servicing. And then the second thing is, I think it really reflects our bond rating, our overall economic outlook here in California. Are we going to be able to pay our bills? Are we going to have enough money to invest in the projects that we need? Are we going to create sufficient jobs for the graduates of the future? So this is all really important. So the treasurer, number one, has a technical responsibility to make sure that those bonds are marketed. And so everyone knows that California, open for business, we're pursuing very important projects, from constructing our educational facilities to our water facilities, everything, public parks, housing, bonds all across the board when it comes to public services. And number two, being a voice, the treasurer issues a formal debt affordability report every year. And in addition to that, by virtue of issuing the state's bonds, is most sensitive to any changes in the state's credit rating. So I want to be that voice to say, these issues, whether the treasurer has a direct hook in terms of one of the committees that I would chair as treasurer or not, have a bearing on our credit rating, have a bearing on our fiscal and economic future. And so I will weigh in on those to make sure that that rating is as strong as possible. And to the last point that the questioner made, each of the different rating agencies use slightly different scales, but AAA is better than BBB, and BBB is better than C. So you want to be as close to that top of the scale as possible. The fact is, in California, we actually do have a lower bond rating than most other states, despite the advances in recent years in the health of our general fund, and we actually have a budgetary surplus this year. There is a complicated set of reasons for that, but I want to make sure, whether it's through expanding our rainy day fund, making updates to our tax system, or the types of investments that we make, that we continue to raise that bond rating and make it healthier, because that's better for all of us.
Got it.
Yes.
Next question is from Anne. And I believe Anne is always the most concerned about your shoes and the health of your feet as you're running. So thank you, Anne, for always being so concerned. Anne says, how can you help affect real change to get big money out of politics?
So there are a couple of things that we can do, beyond just running with these shoes. And I was thinking today with those shoes, actually, I've logged 509 miles on them. And generally the conventional wisdom is no one really knows, but you're supposed to retire a pair of running shoes after 500 miles. But I feel if these shoes have taken me this far, they can definitely go another 125
they have
miles.
Sentimental value to
Exactly. So the first thing is running a different kind of campaign. And for the reasons that we've talked about, that's what I'm trying to do. The second thing is to pursue specific policy changes that make it easier for other people to run the kind of campaign that I've been running and hope to continue to run through this election. So that means banning corporate contributions directly to candidates. And so we have that in other states. Corporations cannot contribute directly to federal candidates, although they can contribute through political action committees. But here in California, a corporation can write a check directly to a political candidate. And a corporation, as much as Mitt Romney might think otherwise, corporations are not people. Yeah. They don't have the range of preferences that you or I have. Corporations' only job is to look out directly for their corporation. And that used to not be the case, and I'd hope to pursue an ethic where corporations are looking out for all their stakeholders, but we have too often seen, and everybody knows it, that when corporations are too involved in politics, what inevitably happens is that they are rigging the game for their own bottom line and not for the broader set of purposes that we all are inspired to get into politics in the first place. So I want to make sure that we do that. And then finally, most importantly, I want to push us toward a system of enacting public financing for campaigns. And that can take one of two different ways. Number one is a matching system, capping small dollar donations where when someone gives up to a certain amount, the the treasury will match that donation to the candidate. So you can cap that at up to $100, up to $150, up to $200, but it gets more money from for candidates who are drawn from a broad range of supporters, and not simply someone who gets a big $5 or $10 or $20,000 or $1 million check from somebody. The second thing we can do is give everybody a voucher. Different proposals have called them democracy vouchers that they can use to allocate to the candidates of their choice. So you can say every person in California gets $50 or $100, and they could say, I'm going to give $10 to my preferred candidate who's running for governor, $5 to the person who's running for water district, and every person, regardless of background or income, would get that amount. And that's really important because right now, a small sliver of the population is funding the vast majority of our campaigns. And if you ever wonder why everyday people's preferences aren't reflected in government, it's because too often politicians, often even subconsciously, are catering to the interests of those who write them the check, and they're constantly thinking, how do I bring more money into them, into their accounts? And they're not always corrupt or venal, but this is the way they get their message out. So if we can change those incentives, that's a really important thing. And one last thing I'll say, these are solutions that we can pursue at the local or state level. If you gave everybody a $100 democracy voucher in a state of 40 million people, assuming everyone got one, that would come to $4 billion. That is a lot of money. But for the health of our democracy in California, especially when people around the country are counting on us, not to mention the savings that would accrue when money is not diverted to special interests, but only goes to the people of California, that would be a really big thing. And then we can continue on that fight that we have to do nationally to eventually overturn Citizens United and make sure that the Supreme Court and our law is aligned with the principles of American democracy, where everyone has a voice and no one voice can drown out everybody else.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen it on the road with you when someone who is unemployed is giving you $40 because they believe that you are actually going to represent their voice and do what's right in Washington, you know, no matter what's coming out of Washington, no matter the special interest. Right?
Absolutely. And I remember when we were in Visalia, you know, a school bus driver who came to see me speak at a local Democratic Club meeting afterward came out and wrote me a check for $100. And it was one of the most meaningful contributions I've received, just based on the principles that I spoke about and that we were talking about just now. And it's really important. You know, every politician will talk about those people, but if the system isn't set up where their voices are heard on equal footing with everyone else's, those voices are too easily forgotten. So we have to make sure we change that equation.
100%.
Yes.
So the next question is from Steve. Steve says, "Go Vivek. My question is, in your time working for our governor, what has surprised you the most about California state government?"
Wow, that is a good question. I came from the thick of the presidential campaign, you know, and where so much of it was, we worked really hard on developing a policy agenda, but in the end, the election wasn't really centered on policy because we were fighting against Donald Trump, who really didn't care about policy at all. And in many ways, the election turned into one big reality TV show, which was much more his ground than anything that my colleagues and I working for Hillary Clinton can work on. So I would say there's so many things I could say about California government and working for Governor Brown, but I would say two things. One is the simple caliber of the people working in that office. And Governor Brown had a pretty small staff, and he'd done the job before, he knows how it is, and relies on experts in their respective fields. But these people were simply incredible. And you hear a lot often in the press, and especially the right-wing press, about government workers and how, they're just going in to cash a check and going through the motions. And, there's no industry where everybody is perfect, but the people I worked with in the California governor's office, both directly in the office as well as across the executive branch, were some of the finest people I've ever worked with in my life. They were smart, they were capable, they were committed, they knew how to fight hard, but also knew how to compromise. And so that was something that I'll always take with me, a textbook example of how government should work. And then the second thing really is Governor Brown himself, who truly is a unique figure in American history, was governor in the 1970s and 1980s, back when my father immigrated to this country, and now has gone for a second term and has done some pretty incredible things. And, if I could say two things, one is that sense of frugality. He understands what he's been entrusted with, the people's money, the people's confidence, and he takes that very seriously, including the way he lives his own life. And then the second thing is how you can bring a real intellectual rigor to politics. Politics is about big things. He often quotes historians and philosophers. For this last year, he's been reading about the Weimar Republic and trying to trace any parallels to what we're seeing in American democracy today so that we can head them off. But at the same time, has a savviness about how politics works, how to cut deals, and understanding that you should go for, fight for everything you have, but take what you can get. And he often said, politics at its best is about addition, not subtraction. And I think that's something that all of us in California, and of course in national politics, can take a lesson from.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think at the national level, that nobody really heeds that motto, right?
Exactly.
It's too often about subtraction instead of addition.
That's right.
So our next question is from John. What do you think California should do with the extra tax income windfall? Governor Brown wants to address homelessness. How about underfunded pensions?
So that is a good question. So whenever there's more money coming in, that's always a good thing. And especially, Governor Brown said the last week, he's like, I don't like to get too giddy because Newton's law, Isaac Newton, what comes up must go down, laws of gravity. And we always know that years of plenty will be followed by years where we will have to fill these gaps in the budget. So the governor's proposed topping out our rainy day fund at $13.8 billion. So I think that's really important, and leaving additional extra in a discretionary reserve. And so I think the governor's starting point is good. I do think, I was reading the Legislative Analyst Office report this morning, and it seems that receipts actually might come in a couple $1 billion over the next couple of years, even above what the governor has projected in his May revision. So the governor's proposed somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million on one-time spending for homelessness. And I think that's a big number, But there is an argument, especially what we're seeing, and we were just in Los Angeles last week. There's a reason for pushing that up even more and making some of these critical investments, and also finding a way for finally funding universal pre-K and making sure that Medi-Cal is extended to more people who are living in the state but are undocumented. So those are all really important. And I remember learning in college, from one of the people I studied, all hard questions are questions of degree. So this is going to be a negotiation between the governor and the legislature. But I think there is an argument. The governor has staked out his position, which I think is a strong one. There is an argument for upping those commitments as we become more certain that more money is coming in. That being said, one thing the governor is absolutely correct about is when you're uncertain what the long-term revenue projection is going to be, especially given who is the president right now and the economic leadership or lack thereof we have coming from the White House, it makes sense to be cautious and invest more in one-time expenditures than in things that you have on an ongoing basis, because few things are more cruel than starting a new program, giving people a lifeline, and then immediately yanking it back, especially when we have infrastructure needs. And then, as the questioner mentioned, we have these long-term obligation needs. So there are a number of things we can talk about to address our long-term pension liabilities. But we have to start by putting in more money. And one of the things the governor did last year was accelerated a payment to CalPERS that should be able to save us several $1 billion over the next couple of years. And as we get more money above an uncertain nature, we should continue to ramp up our contributions to CalPERS and CalSTRS. And I know that can be painful because people feel, well, we have these other pressing needs too. But the thing about these liabilities is that they compound over time. They're not going away. And one of the reasons we're in a situation where only about 70% of our pension funds are funded over future obligations is because too often we underestimated what it would need to pay off those obligations. So there's no easy way out of that, but the first and most important step is to stop assuming that our investments are going to make so much money and start being cautious and putting in more money right now.
Right. Well, that brings us to the end of today's town hall. I know it flies by when you're having so many great questions.
That's right. Talking about long-term liabilities, right? There's nothing more fun.
It's your favorite thing to do. Trust me. I know. I spent a lot of time with him on the road. So you're going to keep running from Los Angeles down through San Diego.
That's right. We're in Long Beach right now. And then, we'll be going through Orange and Riverside County and then eventually get to San Diego.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone who's been sending in notes of support about already casting your votes. We really appreciate it. It really makes our day.
That's right. And a lot of folks have already received their ballots in the mail, have mailed them back, and it'll be 3 weeks from Tuesday is when the election is.
It's so surreal.
It's crazy. It's coming to an end.
Yeah.
Yes.
But thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you.